Hello and welcome. My name is Isabelle Wilkinson, and I have the wonderful job of looking after the Journey Further Book Club. We are a community of over 1,400 CEOs, founders, marketers, and most importantly, readers who, despite living and working in an ever crazy, ever fast-paced world, believe that learning and reading and discussion are crucial in helping us reach our next steps and goals. So we read the latest and greatest business, marketing, and nonfiction books. We share the bite-sized insights from those books, and we give you the scoop on everything you need to know to help you reach your next step. So we do that through hosting discussions about key topics which affect our industry and the sectors that we work in. So that includes things like mental health, diversity and inclusion, sustainability, creativity, and much more. My favorite part of the job is hosting exclusive events with the authors of those books, much like this one today. So if all of that sounds like a bit of you and you're not already signed up, there should be a link now in the comments to get access to our books, discussions, and events like this in the future. So on that, today I'm delighted to introduce you to the author of the latest book to come out from the Do Book company. This is his second Do book, the first one focusing on design and why beauty is the key to everything. And then the latest one then is our current book club read for the month of April. So the author, Alan Moore, is a self-proclaimed craftsman of beautiful businesses. He's a designer and a business innovator on a mission to help businesses discover their own unique beauty. He mentors teams and individuals, delivers leadership programs, and advises clients on regenerative business practices. He has collaborated with companies and institutions from all over the world, including ones you may have heard of like PayPal, Microsoft, Xero, and MIT. And I'm so excited to speak with Alan this afternoon about why we can and should be learning how to build and lead businesses that the world really needs. So welcome, Alan.
Thank you very much, Isabel.
How are you doing?
I'm good. It's a really beautiful day where I'm here today. So everything is good in the world here, for sure.
Oh, excellent. And so on a beautiful day and beauty in general, it's the URL for your website and the focus for your first Do book. Can you explain what you mean by beautiful design and beautiful businesses?
Yes, I mean, the journey into that came out of a very personal reflection around about sort of 2014, 2015, where I really asked myself, what am I going to sort of spend the rest of my life, working on, or what, the next 10 years, 15 years, whatever. I'm 57 years of age, so I'm not a spring chicken. So what would be meaningful to me in terms of all the things that I had done, and actually I also felt that I was a very long way from home. I've been blessed with the opportunity to work for lots of different types of organizations and businesses, big and small, in a variety of capacities. But to me, because I think I always describe myself really as a sort of creatively driven individual, if that engine room is not kind of got the right stuff in it, then I'm not operating in the way that I need to. So I asked myself that question: how do I come home? What is home for me? What is meaningful? And the memory that I've got is being on a beach in Cornwall as a young boy. I think I was about 7, and it was a family holiday, and I can remember watching my family be very happy on that beach. My mother, who I love dearly, was almost like a different human being, and to watch her to be so happy and so playful, I can just remember, even, like I'm going back sort of 50 years, really sort of seeing that joy on her face and how she was. My father was always a very beautiful human being. They were always a great team. Brothers and sisters, we don't always get on so well with each other, as you know, sometimes. And the last thing I reflected on was myself, and I thought, here I am on the beach and I'm incredibly happy. The sun is shining, the sea is, glittering and it's blue. I'm at one with myself, which has not always been the case. And we all go on that journey, as we know. I'm at one with the ones I love the most, and I'm actually one with the natural world. And the only word that can describe that truth is beauty. Multifaceted, integral, simple, complex, magical, meaningful, soulful. That to me was where the kind of that sense of wanting to reclaim this word and this idea was absolutely fundamental to me.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And so I guess that leads us on to Do Build, your latest creation. How did you go from your work then working on helping people to build beautiful businesses to writing this book now? What prompted you to research, write and publish a book called How to Make and Lead a Business the World Needs right now?
Yeah, well, we had such incredible feedback from the previous book, and in many ways, to be really honest, I wrote that book for myself, to write myself home. David Hyatt, the founder of the Do Lectures and Hyatt Denim, and we go back to 2002, I think. And I remember sharing that manuscript with him and saying, "Look, this is what I've written. What do you think?" And he said, "Well, show it to Miranda. Let's see if she likes it." And she did, but it seemed that a lot of people liked it too. And I didn't anticipate that. I've written a number of other books in my life, so it's quite interesting to see when the world really gives back in a way. But I think the genesis then, in terms of Miranda and I deciding that this book should be written, was because I really felt that business was broken. And I've spent my lifetime, from the age of 24, working in and for businesses in a whole variety of different ways. And I felt there was a real conflict with my intention, the way that I wanted to work, and the outcomes I felt I wanted to create, which were still built within, I think, the context of the idea of craftsmanship, which we can talk about, as opposed to actually what we were doing to ourselves and to the planet. And in 2011, I'd published a previous book called No Straight Lines, where I said we have reached the adaptive age of our industrial society, and what we face is an extraordinary challenge. Because what I saw is, and it was it was a 7-year project that I'd sort of worked on and researched. We were going to see a trifecta, which is sort of like a triple infection, is the description of a trifecta of economic collapse is the wrong word, but a problem. A social problem related to that, and something around the climate and these things were going to come together all at the same time. And so therefore we were going to move from a world that was linear as we understood it and believed it to be, growth. We grow. It's 25% every quarter or every year or whatever it is. We are on this treadmill, or living this idea that, consumption is a really good thing. It makes us happy. And what I said is that that's all going to change, and we will end up in a world that feels very non-linear. And we need to have a very different set of tools and a mindset and philosophy to deal with that. And, I didn't predict pandemic, but I could just see it coming down the railroad in a way that was going to be pretty epic for us. And so I felt the book was really important to write, because I felt that there are all sorts of people in this world, either working at a very large scale or at a very small scale, like a one-man band even, that were all really looking at how do we fix this? How do we bring something different into the world? And for me, the beautiful thing was very interesting to explore, because I felt it offered philosophically, as well as practically, a very different way that we could think about what it is we do, what we make, how we make it, and all of the other sort of issues that I think are kind of related to those sorts of questions that we're really fundamentally facing at the moment.
Yeah, and it is absolutely a time of change. I think I was mentioning to you before we came on that, you know, today's my first day back in an office for the first time in however many months, and yeah, we now have to start to rebuild from this point. So it feels like a wonderful time to read your book. And then thinking about this kind of definition of business and what we currently understand it to mean. In the opening chapter, you urge the reader to reimagine the purpose of business in general, and to question our understanding of growth, and ask actually what is growth and what is progress, and how do we measure these things with an eye on the future and with regeneration in mind. So we have business owners listening to this.
Yes.
How would you convince them that it's time to reassess what makes a successful business and the benefits of making such changes?
Well, first and foremost, I think that in the book I reference a lady called, whose name now obviously has escaped me, but Iris Murdoch. Sorry, I'm looking around at my bookshelf because she's there somewhere. But she wrote a book called The Sovereignty of the Good back in the 60s. And she says the good, or the seeking of the good, or the bringing of the good into the world should not be the name of an esoteric object, but should be the tool of every rational man, by which she means mankind, all of us. And I feel that business, in a sense, has lost its way in not for everybody, but in terms of that idea of what does that mean. So if you're in business only to make money, then you're not really in business. You're not in the business of serving the greater good. And the greater good is all of us on this planet, as well as the planet upon which we live in. And the other part to that is also that in terms of the models or the language or the framework that we've used for business, at least in the time that, you know, I've been involved in it, is we've not really thought about this concept of regeneration. So for me, the root of beauty is the root of regeneration. The laws of nature are said to be beautiful, whether that's Einstein's theory of relativity or Paul Dirac's theory about how subatomic particles interact with each other over large times of space. The reality is that nature wastes nothing, and her purpose is to create the conditions for all life to thrive. And just to say that she's been around for quite a long time before we arrived, and I suspect it could be a long time, you know, after we leave, if that's the case. So my contention and my provocation and my invitation to business leaders is that if we want to be around for a little bit longer, and let's just say eternity might be something that would be desirable, then perhaps we should be learning from nature's playbook. And on that basis, then, we need to think in a very different way about what we take, what we make, and what we waste, as a way of thinking fundamentally differently about the nature of the business that we're in and why we're in business in the first place. And I've collected, you know, a whole, you know, a bunch, 50, I think there's probably actually more, which range from a country, which is New Zealand. And the reason why they're in there is because part of their program about thinking about their future is measuring well-being. And I think that's really important, you know. So, you know, if there's anyone from the civil service in the UK listening here at the moment, maybe well-being might be something that we should be measuring. And what does that mean for us? As I said, right down to a one-man ceramicist who just produces the most, in my view, exquisite ceramics. Because my point I'm making is that beauty can live in the macro and the micro and everything in between. All of that is very important to us. They're some of the issues that I really I think about are important.
And so, as you say in the book, you urge us to think regeneratively instead of sustainably, and kind of sustainable and sustainability are such buzzwords. They're such words of the time, but as you say, we should be focusing on regenerative business. So, how can you explain how we should and how and where we should be focusing our attention in order to build regenerative businesses instead of sustainable, and why you think that that's the word that we've chosen to focus on?
So I have so on one level, I have no problem with the idea of sustainability, and I absolutely support the UN's 17 SDGs and the whole thing around, environmental sustainable goals. And actually, there's a lot of evidence that's been produced by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that businesses that are really engineered around the ESGs outperform their competitors on a benchmark by about 5.1 points, which I think is quite significant, important. So if you go back to the idea of nature wastes nothing, we are very wasteful in a linear way that we make stuff, right? So we have to think really fundamentally different about how we're going to create businesses, I think, that really are mindful of that principle of taking and making and being wasteful. I mean, the other word is circular. How do we create a circular economy? How do we create zero waste? How are we climate positive? So in my view, I think that we have to ask fundamentally, what contribution is it that we are creating for the world by bringing whatever it is that we are going to make into this world, whether that's a small thing or whether that's a big thing. And both need to exist. There are definitely certain businesses that need to scale at a level that will serve, humankind. But I've definitely not said you have to be £1 billion business to kind of, be successful. I really challenge that. I think we also have to ask ourselves the question, which is, what is the social benefit that we are providing? What is the environmental benefit that we're providing? Are we being a good ancestor? Are we creating legacy? Because I think that definitely one of the big problems that we've had, and in fact, a VC a venture capitalist I was having a conversation with, he said, the big challenge we've got, Alan, is that our funds are built on a 5 to 10 year program. And we have to realize the benefit for our, funders, investors, in a decade. He said, your horizon line is much longer. And I think that in the conversation with some of the people that I had, like Patagonia or a company called Climeworks, which is very interesting, which is building machines that suck huge quantities of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, because it's not about stopping what it is we're doing. It's all about taking back what we've already put into the atmosphere and into the oceans or into the land. Jan, the CEO of Climeworks, said to me, we've had to find investment from private sources because we can't build a regenerative business over a time frame of a decade. We've got to be looking at something much bigger. And I think that's a huge adjustment that needs to be made. Of course, that's immensely complex because if you're listed on the FTSE or the Dow Jones or AIM or whatever it is, there's huge expectation from your shareholders that you're paying back to them. But I think there is a big renegotiation going on at the moment in terms of actually who it is you're serving and who it is you're benefiting. I didn't say this, somebody else did, but you cannot do business on a dead planet. And I think that that's where we really need to sort of start to get that, back into equilibrium, the equilibrium between ecology, economy, and society. I have no problem with companies making profit. Profit's good. Money into the system creates oxygen to allow us to do other things. But it's a question of where then that money goes and how it's deployed and how it's used. And that to me is extremely important. So I would sort of say, perhaps, for those businesses, and this has actually came out of a conversation with a guy called Peter Charles, who's head of the Dyson School of Design Engineering at Imperial College, where we're having a conversation about beauty. And he said, well, what if you could create gifts that were bestowed upon the world? What if your business was a gift? And I really kind of like that. Of course, it makes people feel very uncomfortable. What does that mean? How does that work? But, you go down to your local cafe, they're playing great music. The people behind the bar are really friendly. There's wonderful coffee, food, vibe, whatever. In a sense, that's a gift to the community. That's creating something of real value. It's intangible in many ways. How do you measure that? But to me, that is an example of something that is really fundamentally very important.
And we're so lucky that we can now get into cafes at the moment. That we're now back in that, exactly, and having those communal moments and moments of community. I'm very grateful for those. And so I wonder then, thinking about kind of the troubles and the pressures that particularly small businesses are probably facing at the moment, how should the leaders of those businesses balance the targets they do have probably from external shareholders and from the growth that they have to demonstrate and the money they have to bring in to keep their businesses afloat? How do they balance that with also focusing on the future and giving back?
I think you can do it in a whole variety of different ways. I mean, is it a percentage of your profits that goes into something which is going to be regenerative? Again, is it a conversation with investors or your backers, which is how are we going to give back? How are we going to create ancestry? There's definitely, I mean, I'm involved with a bunch of businesses at the moment, which I'm helping and advising. There will be certain people within that group, or that we've been talking to, which would have no interest in what I've got to say, because they're of a certain age. Let's just put it that way, and they have a particular mindset, which is what we do as business, which is well. Let me frame it another way. Someone will say to you, I'm sorry, Alan, but this is just business. And as my friend said to me the other day when we were discussing this, which was, what you're really saying when you say that is, it gives me permission to operate without any form of integrity whatsoever. And that to me is unacceptable. And if actually by doing business you harm people, either by the products or services that you bring into the world digitally or from an analog perspective, or actually within the cultures that you create within the organizations that you run, then I'm sorry, but that's just not acceptable. We don't have to operate in that way. And what I've shown is, in fact, actually, if you create, I'm sort of roaming here a little bit, but touching into leadership, if you create psychological safety for your team, even though you want high performance out of them, guess what happens? People turn up and do their very best, and actually they perform in a completely different way as a consequence of that. And that has benefits both internally inside the organization as well as it does outside. And that doesn't matter whether you're a team of 2, 5, or whether you're a team of 1,000 people or maybe 20,000 people. Really understanding that that's how you really get great performance, to me is extremely important. And I suppose in a way that's where I sort of went back to where I saw that through the innovation projects that I was involved with and working on, which were big in many ways, global, lots of money invested. And what I think hurt me the most or upset me the most was to watch those projects be destroyed, broken, ruined, winged because of the politics, because of the hierarchy, because of this idea that, you know, growth for growth's sake at all and any cost was more important than actually all the other stuff that was integral to how you treat human beings, how you treat the planet, you know. And realistically, if we look at, you know, the world that we're in, the pandemic in a sense is really a man-made problem. It's not. I know it comes from nature, zootropic, I think we call it. But the reality is in terms of that drive and that quest, we have fundamentally, you know, wounded this world. And I would hope that the last 12 months that we've been in lockdown, for everyone, would give them truly the space to reflect on the idea of, I can be in business, I can bring the good into the world, I can nurture a great team, I can create a great product, a great service, I can give back, and I can create abundance. I can't see why any of those things are binary in any way, shape or form. These must be the requirements of any leader, CEO, startup, whatever, from here now in, going forwards. It would be my invitation and request in many ways. Otherwise, we won't be playing from nature's playbook, and there's a very simple
might be
outcome.
in trouble. Yeah.
There's a very simple outcome.
So I'd love to invite anyone to, if you have a question for Alan, please do put it in the comments. On that last point then about kind of company culture, Alan, if we've had, you know, I think a lot of businesses have found it quite hard to maintain their current or their existing company cultures, obviously whilst working remotely and sadly due to job loss and furlough and all of these things. So as people build back now and people probably get more face-to-face time, what are the key values that you think business owners need to be instilling and creating in their workplaces to have that positive company culture? Like, what should we be striving for going forwards?
Well, I think in the book I talk about generosity as leadership. How can I be a generous leader? I mean, there's others around empathy, reciprocity, you know, the giving back, the listening, the deep listening. And I think in terms of my journey that I've been on, and in a way, perhaps the pandemic has kind of just accentuated that or highlighted that even more. But I would have claimed this or argued this with or without it. These are the hardest qualities we have as a human being. Compassion, to really listen without judgment. So to your listeners today, little exercise. I'd like you to spend some time, whether it's this evening or tomorrow, but spend 30 minutes in a place of non-judgment, either of yourself or those that are very close to you, or work colleagues, or anything, you know, just because we are so attached to that as a practice that in a way it has a value, but I think it's overvalued. And to me, I think that is in a part a way of really building healing for people, to really listen. With the people that I'm really close to, I'm very open. I'm very honest in terms of, how are you today? Where are you at? Because the only way that you can deal with another human being is to really listen, to hear what they've got to say. And the reality is we are complex, messy, you know, bits of stuff that, you know, we represent ourselves to the world. And of course, it requires a very different skill set to manage that. But I think that that's kind of where we need to go. And as I said, I think that if you're able to do that, and there has to be rules around that, right? So you can't turn up as a victim unless you are a true, victim of something that has happened to you, of which you have absolute no control over. So just to qualify that, very important. But the idea of radical honesty and openness and being able to talk to people about what is happening, why it's happening, how you feel, how you think. But I think also the idea of the construct of how can we make this better? How can we make this business more beautiful? And that could be at a very strategic level, or it could be at a very kind of micro level in terms of what is the one thing that we could do today that would make it better, and always frame it, I think, within the context of the positive rather than the negative. So I hear you, but what can we do to make it better? What would be the one small thing that would make this different? And that, to me, I think would be really transformational for individuals or teams or whatever. Because I think that that's what people really listen to, and to be able to feel that you're your authentic self is very necessary, I think.
And there's a joy and a calmness about, being your authentic self, I guess. And probably that's where the best ideas come from, when people feel they're calmest and the most listened to, exactly as you say. So I guess the final question then is, whilst talking about company culture, you state that creating a learning environment is obviously also fundamental to moving forwards. And that's something that we feel very strongly about. That's why the Journey Further Book Club exists, in order to always keep learning and developing. So if you could recommend just one book to us in the Journey Further Book Club, what would that be?
Well, the book that I've just constantly recommended this year is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which is about nature. She's a Native American, first generation Native American. She's also a botanist and a scientist. And I think her story and the way that she tells a story about how we need to reconnect to what's important is so important to me. I could recommend a second one, but I don't know whether I'm allowed. It's a bit like Desert Island.
Go on.
Well, so the other book then would be, I'd flip the coin, which would be Soetsu Yanagi's Beauty in Everyday Things. And he was a Japanese ceramicist. And I think his description of design and making and the act of craftsmanship in terms of what that means, I think if you read those two books together, would just be such a wonderful way of reframing and rethinking how we should be as individuals in this world.
Yeah. That's amazing. Thank you. I've read neither, so I'll firmly add them to my list. Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Alan. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And thank you for your time and your energy in writing Do Build. For everyone listening, you can obviously get a hold of Do Build. Now you can get a hold of it in an actual bookshop. So that's quite exciting. But it's available online as well on the Do Books website and other sites. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, we host events with authors like Alan every fortnight. And if you sign up to the Journey Further Book Club newsletter, you'll get your name on the list for those future conversations. So come and join the discussion with us. We're talking about sustainable businesses for the next kind of 2.5 months. So we'll be looking at 2 other books in collaboration with Alan's. And so you can get signed up. I believe there's a link in the comments, but you can also visit the Journey Further website or just drop me an email on bookclub@journeyfurther.com. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much. Such a pleasure.